to the Hip Hop Scholar Podcast, the space where culture meets critical thought, where lived experience meets theory, and where hip hop is treated not as a trend, but as a discipline. Today's conversation is absolutely special because hip hop has always been about more than music. It has always been about observation, experimentation, remixing ideas, problem solving, and survival. Those are the same skills that sit at the heart of science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Long before hip hop was welcomed into classrooms or laboratories, it was already teaching people how to think. And today, we are joined by someone who embodies that truth in the most literal way. Our guest today is NiNi, the hip hop scientist. NiNi is not just using science as a metaphor. She is a real scientist who understands that hip hop is not separate from STEM, but deeply connected to it. She represents a generation of thinkers who refuse to believe that creativity and intelligence must live in separate spaces. A generation that knows you can love beats and data, bars and biology, culture and chemistry. NiNi's work sits at the intersection of excellence and intention. She represents what it looks like when scientific rigor meets cultural fluency, when someone refuses to shrink any part of themselves to fit into spaces that were not built with them in mind. She is not translating hip hop for science. She is proving that hip hop has always belonged in scientific thinking, innovation, and discovery. What makes NiNi's voice so important is more than just what she knows, but how she shares it. She makes science feel reachable without watering it down. She makes brilliance feel familiar. And in doing so, she's opening doors for young people who may never have seen a future scientist reflected back at them. That kind of impact cannot be overstated. In this conversation, we are going to explore how hip hop influences the way we learn, the way we question, and the way we innovate. We are talking about rhythm and memory, storytelling and comprehension, representation and access. We are talking about what it means for young people to finally see themselves reflected in STEM spaces, not as visitors, but as contributors and leaders. This episode is for the students who were told science was not for them, for the educators searching for new ways to reach brilliant minds, for the parents raising future engineers, doctors, coders, and researchers, and for anyone who understands that culture shapes cognition. NiNi reminds us that curiosity is cultural, that intelligence is not neutral, and that hip hop has been sharpening scientific minds long before anyone gave it permission. So tap in, lean in, and get ready for a conversation where the lab meets the cipher. This is the Hip Hop Scholar Podcast with none other than NiNi, the hip hop scientist.
Beautiful introduction. Beautiful introduction. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, NiNi. Dr. NiNi, I should say. Yep. Yep. Go put some respect on that name. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. So we're going to get started into the conversation. One of the first questions that I ask, and I'm going to make it twofold for you. This question is has two questions to it. When did you fall in hip hop? And then with that, when did you fall in love with science? Talk to us, please.
Man, I want to say it's almost at the same time. So, I have a unique life story. So, personally, I'm a type 1 diabetic myself. And I was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes when I was 4 years old. So I've dealt with, this world of dealing with debilitating diseases and having to, live your life with that disease. And that's what really triggered my love for science. Growing up, having to get insulin shots, check your blood sugars, watch what you eat at the age of 4, and really having to learn very quickly how to take care of yourself. If your parents aren't around, if you're at school, if you're on the playground, anything happens, so dealing with that disease, it immediately triggered my interest for science. And I always remember, in tying this in to hip hop growing up, with a black family. And I was born 89 going into the 90s. That's when I just love that era of music, right? That's when
Yeah.
hip hop and R&B was really going off.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
remember, I have such a family oriented family, and we always had family gatherings, big ones, both sides of the family coming over from my mom and dad. And I have three sisters. And so music was always a part of our lives. So I remember just growing up so much, and listening to these songs, making those little dances with my sisters and things
Mhm.
like that. And remembering how no matter what I was dealing with and how different I felt, I always felt at home because of those memories, those family events, those just things like that where I was spending time with family, and how it made me feel normal even though I knew that I wasn't absolutely normal, in terms of the disease that I had. So I would have to say honestly, they both went hand in hand. And it was really deep for me, that rooted connection to my family with hip hop, but then also that rooted connection to the science with what I was personally dealing with.
Wow, how absolutely a beautiful story of resilience and perseverance, and sparking the interest in science for
Yeah.
self-preservation, but also making that connection to hip hop where you have the resilience. I've had the the honor of having students in the classroom who have dealt with having the diabetes
Yeah.
and having other debilitating diseases as a youth. And it's so important that they find joy, that they don't feel isolated in those moments. So shout out to your family for being
Absolutely.
there for you, and then you also standing strong as a scientist you are, and having such a personal story to share with others, and inspiring them along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Oh yeah, thank you. That girl, wow. And so, that ties into some of the questions I have for you with science and identity.
Awesome.
And then, was there a moment for you that you started to understand how hip hop and science were not separate worlds for you? So you are NiNi, the hip hop scientist. And so that name, the hip hop scientist, how does that connect to the work that you do in the STEM field?
Yeah, so it's all culture based for me. So I remember coming into this field, and I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I'm not a native Houstonian. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I came out here. I went to Marquette University for my undergrad in Wisconsin, and then I moved here. Went to Texas Southern University for my master's degree, and then ended up going to the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston for my PhD.
Okay.
And, that distinguishment between going from undergrad at a predominantly Caucasian university versus
Mhm.
coming to TSU, which is obviously an HBCU, I realized the difference in my experience there. And I remember in undergrad that I never really felt accepted into the community. I felt like I was looked over. I felt like I was just another body in the room. And I felt like there were no real opportunities that were given to me to excel. And I tell people the truth. Honestly, in undergrad, that made me fall behind. I didn't graduate with the academics that I came in with. I was valedictorian in middle school. I was valedictorian in high school. And then when I went to college, I graduated with right below a 3.0 GPA. And I was like, what happened? And being a young individual and trying to find your way, I wasn't really sure. So I took some time. I took about a year off of school during that time, and I said, what was it in this experience that made me move away to the thing that from the thing that I love, which is academics. And
Mhm.
and I knew that it had to be that I just really didn't know where I fit into the community. When I looked around me, all of the professors, all of the scientists were all Caucasian, and
Mhm.
predominantly male as well, right?
Right.
And so that made me like, I don't think I can do this, and I'm not sure Again, luckily having very supportive family. I had my oldest sister and my mom were like, you need to go for it. Go for it. And see if it's really what you say you want to do, which is how I ended up at Texas Southern University because my oldest sister moved out here at the time. And so, yeah, just really for me, it was all about identity, right? And, I was like, when I got to Texas Southern being accepted, I got into the flow, I was excelling. They knew my name throughout Texas Southern University because I looked around and there were other scientists that looked like me. There were other scholars that looked at like me. They identified with me. They could even identify with my experience that I had had. And so
Mhm.
for me, as I went on in my journey, I said, I think it's just so important for us to show that we are here. And they don't show us, right? You're not going to see us on the billboards. You're probably not going to see us on the brochures or the
Mhm.
websites, And so I said, but we're here. And that's where I birthed NiNi, the hip hop scientist. I wanted to show that not only do I love science, but I love me. I love the color of my skin. I love my culture. I love everything with that, the food, the music, the dance. And I said, I really, really want to show these young scholars that you don't have to look or sound or act one way to be intelligent and to make it in this field. And so that's kind of where that interjection really came for me, is just to say, man, we're here and we're doing this thing and we can still love who we are while we're doing it.
Absolutely, and unapologetically at
Um,
that as well. Seriously. That, I've had similar experiences with, they coin it as PWIs,
yeah,
predominantly white institutions. Both my undergrad, both of my masters, and in pursuing of my PhD, the same story.
right.
That was actually one of the reasons why I locked my hair, was
Wow.
because I wanted to be seen, me,
Slowly.
right?
Love it.
My authentic Black self
Yes.
to be seen no matter where I am. Even if I don't open my mouth, you know that I'm going to be the Blackest person in the
Yep.
room. And
Exactly.
period, right?
Period.
And the challenges that go along with that, just to hone in on that space, the challenges and the way that we speak. I know you never got an apology, but I'm so sorry, so apologetic about your
Yeah.
experience in undergrad, because I understand that, trying to find yourself in that age range,
Yep.
and then also being able to be your most authentic self and to identify yourself as, and I can only imagine in the STEM field,
Mm-hmm.
where it's dominated by Caucasian males,
Yes.
and saying what you can and can't do with such a challenging curriculum.
Yep.
um Going from being valedictorian and then being humbled, and I feel like that's what happened,
Yep.
to go through that. But then Texas Southern University
Yes.
rising the champion out of Dr. NiNi Patterson, and seeing that greatness in you, that is such a benefit of HBCUs,
Yeah.
that allow for people of color, for us to come together and be able to excel. It's, the curriculum is the same, and actually may even be a bit more challenging, um,
Exactly.
in that aspect. And so your story speaks volumes about finding your authentic self and sticking to it.
Yep.
Never letting someone tell you who you are, and definitely who you are not. Beautiful story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And so, and let's talk about that still. My next question, as a real scientist, as you see on the screen, she is Dr. Patterson, scientist.
That's
Clock
me.
it, clock it. Uh, what stereotypes about who belongs in STEM have you personally had to navigate or challenge? So let's unpack that,
Yeah.
because there may be someone watching this who themselves or even their child or cousin may be going through the same thing and may feel like, that's just me, but in actuality, it's a stereotype, it's a microaggression. So what have you seen specifically in that realm?
Absolutely. And I'll give you a couple quick stories where they always pinpoint out to me, and when something sticks in your mind, that means it really bothered you and it bothered you for a reason. And I remember my first experience in undergrad. I was sitting in a classroom. I think about 100 students in there. We were sitting in the lecture hall, and it was actually a general biology class. And the professor at the time asked a question, and I remember raising my hand. Nobody raised their hand to answer this question. I raised my hand to answer this question, and his response to my hand going up was, "You want to answer?" And it was almost like a, you know, how you
Mhm.
I was taken back, and I was like, well, let me look around the room because I'm trying to see if he's first speaking to me, and if he is, why would he ask that question?
Mhm.
And I it took me back. And I remember I still answered that question, and I answered that question correctly because I wanted to show him, yes, I did want to answer that question, and I
Good,
wasn't going
good.
to hesitate.
Mhm.
But just seeing that sense of, there are definitely there, we're gonna use the word, there's racism issues when it comes to being in these fields, right?
Mhm.
Being
Mhm.
the only Black student sitting in that lecture hall, and to get that question when I am actually trying to answer something that you asked, I mean, that absolutely baffled me, and it took me back. And at the time, being, as you said, younger, it did make me feel smaller. I was like, where am I? Am I supposed to be doing this? And who do I talk to about this? Right. In my family, I do have a family that is educated. My mom has her master's degree. I have sisters who, they're also went through their process of going to schools and things like that. And so, but nobody was in the science field. I was the only one out of my family that went into science. And so that wasn't something that I could take home and say, well, I had this experience. What do I do about this? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I didn't know what to do. So, I just know that at that time, I knew to stand my ground and to say, yeah, I do want to answer this question. Yes, I do. And I answered it with confidence, even though I didn't feel confident. And I think that's really important for scholars to know. A lot of us are going to deal with imposter syndrome, right? No matter who you are, right? So you deal with that imposter syndrome by what you stand in that, and you still stand confidently. You don't let anybody intimidate you, or make you feel smaller. And so I had to learn that early on. And then I think, the next experience, which was quite recent actually, while I'm a postdoc now. So, I have my PhD. I work at MD Anderson Cancer Center. I study pancreatic cancer and diabetes at MD Anderson in my PI's lab. And during the time we were getting these patient tissues in, and I remember I was sending an email to the guy who was helping us get the patient tissues that were coming in so that we could do our studies. And this guy would not reply back to me. And I just thought it was really weird. And so the last email, some just said, CC your boss in your email, which again, he looks nothing like me.
Mhm.
I'll say it that way. So I
Mhm.
CC him in, and all of a sudden, I mean, reply back so quickly. I was like, I just sent the email. And it showed me that no matter what level you are, right, and what credentials you have, I'm going to be looked at as what I like to call a double minority. I am a Black female
Right.
scientist, and that's what I tell people. I have two things against me when I'm in this field. So when I walk in a room, I have to be a million times better. No
Yeah.
matter how hard I work, I got to be a million times better than most people going into that same room. And so, it taught me early on that you have to have thick skin, you have to have resilience, and you have to be confident. And trust me, now they respect me because I stand in it. I don't let anyone get me, put me down or get me down. I really stand in confidence when I walk through those rooms. So, that's my major thing is you have to stay confident. You do.
Absolutely. And, thankfully too, that allyship is so important as well,
Yes.
is being able to work with people who may not look like us, but they see the color, but they
Yep.
also see the brilliance. They
Yep.
see the camaraderie that, what, we are all scientists. So let's get the job done. And so in that situation, being able to have that support, even though you had to CC and do that, working through that, because those are things that I see as well.
Yep.
um but we still continue to do those spaces for the future generations, because it's
Absolutely.
not easy. It's
It's a
absolutely not easy, especially, most especially when we think about STEM and the groundbreaking things you are doing with cancer and diabetes.
yeah.
That is, it's killing people. It's
Yeah.
unaliving people with things that are preventive, the knowledge of, different habits and how can we make that change. You
Absolutely.
are really out here changing lives, but because your skin is different, because your hair is curly,
Mhm.
because of things that you were born with,
Yeah.
people judge and automatically, like,
Yeah.
they've been ingrained to think that, oh well, then lesser than, you don't know because of that. And so working through that helps to build the next generation. And just thank you, the whole time you were speaking, like, I'm welling up in tears, because it's so phenomenal to
Yeah.
speak to a woman of your caliber that is in this field, working in this field, and taking on the battles,
I
taking
really
them on unabashedly.
I really appreciate it. And that truly does mean a lot to me. And again, I honestly I wasn't one of those people who I didn't know how to promote science. I'm like, how do you promote science, right? But I had many mentees say, I wish there was a way for you guys to show us that you're there. And I actually had one challenge me and say, you should get on social media and start a science pages. And this is how all this birthed. And I said, I don't know about that. And she's like, this is the only way we're going to see you. And so, that's where my TikTok came and my Instagram came. And I really did change the trajectory of my social medias based on advice from one of my mentees that I was mentoring in a lab, saying, we want to see more of you, out there. And so, yeah, it means a lot to me that it's having an impact.
Absolutely. That's how I reached out to you. You were in the lab sitting with someone and y'all were laughing. It was another female, a person of color, but she's not black. She's a person of color. But you all were actually having fun in the
Yeah,
laboratory. And
exactly.
then it was like, oh my goodness. And then to see your name, absolutely had to reach out and celebrate you, but also learn from you and then promote this to an audience that benefits from this story, because there are often so many people, they give up.
Yep,
you know, it can be such a challenge to continue on in any field if you feel alone, if you feel isolated, and
absolutely.
think that, well, nobody understands what I'm going through. But in all actuality, you do, especially when you're talking about STEM, pursuing and earning that PhD, postdoctorate, and all those amazing, amazing things you're doing with your career
Thank you.
thus far. You
Thank you.
still have so far to go. And so, yes, ma'am, thankfully, those mentees,
Yes.
you know, you having that humility to listen and adhering to that spirit and saying, you know what, I'm gonna try,
Yep.
and reaching out and doing that. So yes, that's exactly how we connected, because I was able to see your excellence and see how much fun it is. And yeah, and even to my son, he's a STEM major at UH, and for him to see that, because he also does that research about STEM being introduced early on, because
Yes.
that was that's what happened with him, is that he had an amazing science teacher his third grade year, that sparked science unto him, and that's
I
what
love that.
helped him to move forward into science.
I love
Especially being from where we're from. We're originally from Louisiana,
Okay.
and with my story, my history, which we're focusing on you. STEM, is a vital and essential pivot
Yeah.
that Black people have to pay attention to. And so raising
Absolutely.
students that can code, that can do the
Absolutely.
math, and as challenging that it is, they can do it.
Yes, they
They
can.
just need to hear voices like yours.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So let's continue on with this conversation. I'm promised my hip hop scholar family, I'm not going to cry, but you have to be, just so moved by
Yeah.
what NiNi, the hip hop scientist, is saying. As a hip hop scholar, it is such an amazing, beautiful thing to see you embracing hip hop in such a way that it showcases your identity, and that's what moves you, and that's part of your title. Like it's such It's such greatness. Like,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being all of who you are.
No, I really appreciate you having me. And like I said, same to you, wearing many titles. Not only are you a scholar, but you're also a mother. And all the other titles that we wear and people don't know, those are all different jobs, right?
Mhm.
And doing what you do, it absolutely matters. And so thank you for opening up the floor for, people like me to come on here and be able to again extend, more advice and things to others who want to do what we do. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we do. It's what we got to
Yeah.
do. So let's talk more about hip hop as a learning system.
Mhm.
So, when we think about hip hop, it relies heavily on repetition, rhythm,
Mhm.
pattern recognitions. How do those same element, or how could they show up in scientific learning and research?
Oh my goodness. I tell people, and this is a personal thing for me. I remember when I had to study for tests or I had to write papers, I almost couldn't do it without having a specific like frequency in my ear or like a beat repetition in my ear. And like, for example, if I needed to memorize, terminologies or things like that, and I would have a certain song to it. And it was like my brain would just you know what I mean? My brain would just
Mhm.
go to that beat and I could remember things based off of that rhythm, right? And I was like, man, early on, there is something to this. Like, we
Yeah.
can use hip hop to learn. It gives us a rhythm, it gives us a specific frequency that allows us to kind of tap into our brain in a different way. And so, that's really one of the ways that I use it. Like, sometimes when I'm grant writing, I will literally like I gotta have my Tupac in my ear or my Jeezy, and I'm like,
Mhm,
and
mhm, mhm.
I know my lab mates are sitting around like, what is she listening to?
Mm.
She over there bobbing her head and doing her thing, but it really did get me in a rhythm of comfortability and again, even confidence, depending on which song that you're listening to. Songs that might be uplifting, songs that sometimes you got to listen to it, even a more calming song when you're dealing with stress. You might want to listen to something differently, but that was really one of the earliest ways that I used it before. And then I remember when you really listen to the words that some of these hip hop artists are using, I
Yeah.
mean, just the creativity and the innovation, right?
Mhm.
Um, it's such a big thing in science. And I used to think to myself, these same elements that these hip hop artists are using, we should be using these same elements in science. What idea do I have that is different from everybody else's idea around here? What's innovative? What's creative? What's really going to set the bar in a different way? Because everybody around me, obviously being at MD Anderson, everybody's studying cancer. Okay, so what makes me different? What innovative idea do I have, and how am I going to answer those questions? And so, you know, I that's one thing I love about hip hop is you can look at so many of these different artists and they all have a different sound and a different look and a different style, and I connected to that, and saying I can do that same thing with science where, my science may not look like yours. I may not do the same experiment that you do. I might not do it just like you. I might do it differently and get a better result. I don't know, but just kind of having that mindset, I feel like it really did boost my confidence in that way.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow. Yes. When you were talking, it made me think about Kendrick Lamar and
Yeah,
how he's changing how hip hop is listened to, where he's going from your performative, hard
absolutely.
hitting lyrics, but then also that mental health journey and that
Absolutely.
melody and taking that on, and exactly what you just said, standing out, doing it your way, that remix
Yeah,
of being
absolutely.
apart from everyone. And that's also the tradition of the pillars of hip hop, with the griot tradition of storytelling and, making it memorable. Such insight, such
Yeah,
profound insight there, NiNi.
yeah,
And then, so with that, then, that music helping you to remember that terminology.
yeah.
So are you looking at like a lyric based music, or is it instrumental hip hop instrumentals? Like, which one, or how are you
Honestly,
doing that?
both. Yeah,
Okay.
when I look back and think about it, I've done it with both. And I don't know what it is about your brain. Obviously, I'm not a neuroscientist, and I tell that People think all science is the same science. It's not the same science.
Mhm.
Look, I am a cell biologist, but there's something with your brain where you can connect, even if it's certain words or certain rhythms, or like I said, certain frequencies to what you were doing at the time, and just that memorization. And so I could actually use both. It didn't matter, but it did have to be a song that I could really relate to. It had to be something that would make me feel comfortable, or really make me feel like, okay, I like this beat. It's all about the beat for me, really. So yeah, I think it's, a little bit of both.
Amazing. Amazing. This really has me thinking about some things in curriculum for sure, for sure.
Yes.
Um, yes. So such insight. So then, and you answered a lot of these questions as you looked around. So let me ask you this. Let's try to think about this together. If hip hop were treated as a legitimate learning framework in STEM education, what do you think would change?
Oh man. Honestly, I I would have to say I feel like there would be more innovation. There would be more creativity. I do feel like in at times we do fall into a certain aspect in science where you do kind of hear similar stories throughout different people's research projects. And obviously that's because you have to use other people's data, right? To say
Mm,
that, you know what, this data's out here. They found this. Now I'm going to take this further. But sometimes in that you get this repetitiveness, and it sounds like you're listening to the same research project over and over again. And so I do feel like that will bring a sense of just, innovation and creativity that would expand, our horizons in terms of what kind of research we want to do, what questions are we trying to answer. And then the other thing is, honestly, I just really think you would see more of us. You know what I mean? And that's
mhm,
just the honest to God truth. Not only on this side of the realm, but also, for example, I had a friend ask me a while back, why does it seem like we are not well represented in terms of treatments, in terms of, just research in general, medications? And I said, well, a lot of us don't want to deal with that side of the world. There's a whole history, right? And why we don't want to deal with the medical system. We don't
mhm,
want to go see doctors. We don't want to sign up for research or be organ donors. We have a lot of trauma with that area, right?
mhm,
Historically. And I said, unfortunately, when we do research and we do, for example, what we call translational research, so going from bench to bedside, um, when you get these patient samples that you study, these are usually, again, predominantly white Caucasians or predominantly female Caucasians. And you see very little minority samples that are represented in this. And it's because they're not there, right?
mhm,
We don't have them. We don't have access to them. And so I do feel like having that as a framework would almost bring some kind of comfortability and inclusivity. You know what I mean? That would
mhm,
be there if we did something like that. So I always push for things like that. How do we bring us into this element? How do we study what we need? Because our DNA is not the same as their DNA. Something that might work for a mutation that they have, we might not have that mutation. We might
mhm.
have a different mutation with the same cancer or heart disease or whatever it is, but we don't know that because we don't have enough of us there. And so I do think that, something like that would just be beautiful to me. Yeah, introduce hip hop, bring us in. We, we need to be there.
That's right. And
Yeah.
it brings me to connect, and forgive me, I do not know this young man's name. He is a black male, and he did earn an award in dermatology, where he
Okay.
started to showcase the differences in different dermatology issues
Yeah.
in white skin versus black skin, and how
Absolutely.
it's not seen. And he would make books like that. He was even the one that did the black child, a picture of a black placenta and
Okay.
what that looks like. And, it being the first of its kind as
Yeah.
well. Imagine we're in 2026 and, seeing the first of its kind,
Yeah.
even to this day, the first of the first. But again, you're discussing the importance of that.
Yeah.
It is, yeah, that's something that definitely has hit me where, yeah, not only representation on the field of being the doctor, but also for the doctors and the researchers to be able to see that and
Yep.
study that. But how do we trust the
Yeah.
system?
How do we trust the
How
system?
how
Absolutely.
can we? Just like on social media, I believe her name was Dr. Green.
Yeah.
She had passed away in childbirth, and her whole career was in preventions of that, right?
Absolutely.
And so the limitations of what actually happened, the specifics of her passing, but also adding to that story of Black women in pregnancy, and the fear that goes with that just compounded it even more.
Yeah.
Um and so again, this framework using a legitimate, authentic way to still build that trust with the people, that's it's as you just said, it's important, it's needed. We just have to figure out how to do that, though.
Right, exactly. And it does. It starts with discussions like this. We have to have these talks, and we have to have soldiers in the field somewhere that's saying, we have to have repositories, biobanks with our blood, our tissues, our specimens, so that we can understand our biology. You know what I mean? And until then, we're always going to be at the top of a lot of these diseases. I actually got into pancreatic cancer and diabetes. Why? Because those are two diseases that are being dominated by the Black community, right? Those is specific to things, and I said we got to do something about this. Nobody's answering these questions as to why. What is the genetic makeup? What's happening? What's the connection that our people are constantly getting diabetes and having specific cancers like pancreatic cancer? What is the answer to that? But we can't get there if we don't have anything to study that, right? We can't get
Mhm.
there. So we need more of us here. We need more soldiers in the front, and we need more discussions like this to the public so that we can get to our young scholars and say, if this is something you're interested in, come on to this other side, because we need you guys. We need to be represented more, especially during a time like this with unfavorable political views saying that we no longer matter, right? They take away DEI initiatives. That messed a lot of minority scholars up so much. It took away grants from them. People don't know the impact that had. I remember I was going to submit a grant, and I had to take out everything in there that said that I wanted to do things like this. I wanted to, speak more to females or speak more to Black scholars.
Mhm.
I had to take all of those things out of my grant, and it didn't feel good, right? It felt
Right.
like an attack on my race. It was
Mhm.
like, oh
Mhm.
my God. So yeah, we have to keep fighting, and we have to keep having these discussions.
Absolutely. I mean, the verbiage matters so much in the representation of what you're writing.
Yep.
As an English professor, thinking about you taking out the meat out the sandwich, how is it that and it becomes the same as everyone else's.
Yeah.
And you're
Absolutely.
targeting specific data that needs to be changed. And so
Yes.
taking out that narrative
Yeah.
to satisfy, again, the dominant narrative,
Yeah.
it really becomes unfair. But what they can't take away, though, my dear, what they can't take away is your presence,
Absolutely.
your stance, and the uncertainty of what's going around. You know, we still have to be stoic. We still
Yep.
have to really know that this is the time of giants where we have to be there, and people, getting older and passing away, and they were, our inspiration. They were our, what we really looked up to, but now we have to be that for the next generation. And
Absolutely.
so the way that you are able to navigate through that and continue to navigate through that prayerfully 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50 years down the line, then that's something that they won't have to do because
Absolutely.
you took that charge on, and making it happen.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, girl. I mean, thank you. I don't know how many times I'm gonna say that, but I mean it every single time I do
Yeah,
because yes, representation and access to STEM. Um,
absolutely. Yes.
so that's our my next set of questions. And we've talked about the representation in STEM, and it still matters so deeply, even in 2026, that
Yes.
the representation in STEM matters. How does seeing someone that looks like you change the way students engage with science? Talk to us what happens when you meet your mentees or you meet other students in science, and how does that change the way the students engage?
Yes. And I still think, when they see you, they're like, okay, she looks like me, but they're still a little bit uncomfortable, right? They like, but she's
Mhm.
doctor. And what I do for my mentees is before they even come to me and step in the room and talk to me and see what I look like, I send them an email and I tell them, these are all the things that we're going to do before you get here. But I want you to answer some questions about yourself so I can get to know you. So by the time you come here, I have a little bit about who you are, and then I give them, certain aspects about me. This is who I am. This is where I grew up. This is my likes, dislikes. I want to make them comfortable because it's not about intimidating them, right? It shouldn't be about that. I'll say that. I'm going to correct that. It should not be about intimidating them. I didn't have that same experience, but I want them to know that we want you here because we need you here. And so I think that approach of not only seeing somebody that looks like you, but it also is on the side of the mentor to make them feel comfortable to want to be there and not run them away from something that they really have decided that they want to do. So, I really do push for my mentees to be comfortable. I understand that there's different learning styles. So I might ask you, what way do you like to learn? Are you verbal? Do you need to see imagery? What ways do you want to learn? Do you like graphics? Whatever it is, I will ask you, how do you learn so that you're not intimidated? Because I might teach you how I learn, and that might, scare
Mhm.
you away. Like, I don't understand what just happened. So let me give you what you need. And I do feel like, again, that mentorship is so important in fields like this. That mentorship is key. But to walk in a room and also not only get good mentorship, but to see somebody that looks like you just makes it all, the more compelling, right? And so, yeah, I absolutely think it's important because I'm telling you, going to Texas Southern University, and I'm going to say a shout out to Mario Holloman, who was my mentor there. I mean, amazing mentor. He made me feel at home, and that really allowed me to excel there. So shout out to him. I still talk to him to this day. We talk all the time. He's like
Mhm.
a dad to me. Yeah.
Yes. Not only being a mentor and being there to, like you say, you don't want to intimidate, but also making it clear that I need you to succeed. I
Yeah.
want you to be successful. It reminded me so much of Megan Thee Stallion. She just opened up their Popeyes in
Yeah.
Florida, and they
Yes.
showed the picture where, right? Shout out to Megan, and the entrepreneurship of opening up a Popeye. So it was I guess the manager or somebody GM was like, okay, we're not going to introduce the names because it'll take some time. And she was like, no, we got time. And she walked to everybody and asked
I love it.
everyone their name, was engaging with everyone. And that spoke volumes to so many people where she didn't have to do that, but being so personable and making not only her money, but the success of others,
I
being
love
able to support others, so important. So when you were speaking, it made me think of that,
Yeah.
making the people understand that I'm human.
Yeah.
I'm a human
Yep.
too. I'm a person. So we
Exactly.
all can rise together. And
Exactly.
you can not only get to this level, but even be better.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's what we
that
want to
that's
push
so
for,
important.
right? Be a better scientist than I am. I don't want you to be just like me. I want you to excel so far so that I can sit back and say, I taught her or him.
Mhm, mhm,
I was a part
mhm.
of that journey before they got this Nobel Prize, right? Like,
Right, right. And speaking
absolutely.
that life, because
Yes.
no, it wasn't told to us.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mario for giving you that and any other person that did so. But
Absolutely.
remember in undergrad, and remember at those points, those pivotal points,
Yeah.
having to push through,
Yeah. Yeah.
literally pushing through, and that made you stronger.
Yeah.
But what would have happened, what tide could have been turned had you been supported in that moment instead of having to
Absolutely.
push through that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I know that's right. Let's see. I have a few more questions. I have a lot of questions though. Like I
No, it's okay.
you look, you'll have to come back on the podcast again. Like I
Hey, I'm excited about this. This is an amazing interview. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I mean, you're an amazing guest because
Thank
the
you.
reality of it, you know, that impact that you give, but also the hard work that goes along with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Taking the time to send the email, to ask the questions, to
Yep.
read the answers. And so, especially when you said, what stood out to me was when you asked them, how do you learn?
Yeah.
Because you do have audio learners, you have
Yep.
visual learners,
Yep.
kinesthetic and haptic. And
Exactly.
if you sit there and you are lecturing to someone, like I'm a visual learner myself.
Yep.
So if
Me
you're
too.
lecturing, I would panic
Yep.
and try to hurry up and write something down. But to meet them halfway and make that connection, like that's such
Yeah.
so amazing.
Yeah.
So amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. How do you envision the future of hip hop influencing STEM spaces? If we could actually put a framework together, and even not just a framework, but just hip hop altogether, what would that future look like?
Yeah, I wish there was something I was talking about a long time ago. And I wish I remembered the young man's name. There's another black professor. He's in the neuro field, and he just came to me not too long. Rufin. His name is Rufin in neuroscience. So y'all look him up too. He's really good. I like how he's promoting, right? And again, he's another one that's really, I feel like culturally also kind of advertising that thing. And I remember looking at his page and thinking about my platform and looking at all these other things that are being promoted out in this world, right? And I said, how cool would it be to have for us to be able to link up with some of these hip hop artists, right? And say, I love that you guys do music, but you got these big platforms. Let's try to tie this in to bring our young scholars in, right? Let's promote that through whatever songs, whatever we can do, books, anything like that. Use these platforms to also bring in our scholars and say, hey, you guys, there's some people here, they want you in this field. Let's use our influence to bring these students in. I think that will be such an absolutely amazing thing to do. And we do have certain artists who are doing that, but to really really push for that and say maybe you can't be a music artist, maybe you can't be an NBA star, maybe you can't be a football star, but guess what, if you fit into these fields, there's somewhere for you as well, and really promoting that you can be a star no matter what. You don't have to be on TV to be a star, and really having that. I would absolutely love to see a platform like that, and to get that kind of influence going for sure.
That's a brilliant idea,
Yeah.
NiNi. Brilliant idea in making that a mainstay,
Yep.
and not just a few, but the whole of them to be able to do that. That
Absolutely.
well, challenge accepted. We'll definitely
Exactly.
work on that. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Exactly.
Let,
Exactly.
let, let me see. So if a young student loves hip hop but doubts their ability to succeed in science, what would you want them to hear from you? So they see you as the hip hop scientist, but they doubt their ability in science. They may not be good in math or, putting together anything off the periodic table or
Yeah.
all the things that STEM people think about. What would you want them to hear from you to help to build that with them?
Yeah. I think, and I tell people, and I'm very honest about this. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing, and that's okay, right? We can't always be the doctors. We can't always be the nurses, right? There may be somewhere for you in science though. And this is the part that a lot of people don't know is that science is not one thing. There's 1,000 jobs in science, and you'll be surprised about where you can fit in. We have people who do graphics. We have people who help write grants. We have people who help us process samples. You know, they may not be full doctor, but they are still doing the work. So you might have some aspect that you are really good in and it fits somewhere in science, but it takes a little bit of knowing, you know, where you fit. We even have areas of law in science, right? If you're a lawyer, government, we have that. It's so many different jobs. And so I would tell them, what are your strengths first? Then once I find out your strengths, I would say, let's tap into that. Because maybe you might not know the periodic table, but you may know this. And so
Hmm.
where in science can you fit in there, right? I think that's important for us to know and to say, what are the jobs that are really out there that I could tap into? Because they're there and there's so many jobs. I was like, that's a job in science? I had no idea. Like graphics, people are getting paid to do graphical you know, imagery for our articles, you know, and they get paid good money for this, right? IT,
Mhm.
just different things that I think are important. And so I would definitely say to them, maybe there is not a specific science that might or you know might be your thing, but there's somewhere for you to fit and you can get paid good money for it. So that's
That part.
honestly what I would probably tell them.
Fantastic. And then what I also try to tell my students is that not only are there positions that are out there that we don't know, they're still creating positions out there.
Yes, yes,
They-
absolutely. Make one for yourself.
That part, right? Yeah, you
Absolutely. That's where that hip
trailblazer.
hop and innovation comes in. Look, get your
Hmm.
mind thinking, the light bulbs go off and say, I'm good at this and science needs this. Bring it to us. I'm telling you, somebody is probably going to fund it if it's a great idea.
I know that's right. That's right. Somebody will, somebody
Yes,
should,
yes.
but still understanding it is a great idea. Like never
Yeah,
holding on to that
yes,
idea, push it and that confidence too. That's what hip
absolutely.
hop absolutely does. It builds that confidence. You know, it helps. Like I was speaking with the artist before, you know, to go from not to to write music and then performing the music. You know,
Yeah,
you are
yeah,
such so involved in the words that you have created. And I
exactly.
tell this to my students as well, that whenever you write something or share your ideas, you always have to remember that the applause is extra.
Yeah,
That
that's
it's
right.
not necessary. It's not the first thing that you're doing it for.
Absolutely.
You know, like that applause is just something in addition to you knowing that what you have to share is that important.
Oh, I'm writing notes right now. I'm like, where's my pen? I'm like, what's my pen and paper so I can tell my mentees this? Yes, I love that. I absolutely love that. Yes, yes. And
Because
I
it's
think that's important, especially in a field like this. If you think about science, again, we're not really being promoted. It's not like we're super famous people. You're probably not gonna know a scientist on the street if you see one. When I walk through the door, through the store, nobody knows who I am. But that
yeah.
doesn't mean that I'm not doing impactful great work to help change lives. And so you just have to know that you're making a difference. And yeah, your ideas matter. If somebody says no, you might get 6, 7, 8 no's before you get a yes. And that's okay. But you just keep at it, you know, and that's so important. That's absolutely, I love that. Yeah, I'm writing that down.
Well, feel free, my dear. Feel free. We're both
Yeah.
learning from each other, and again, hosting these conversations, right, and being able to have these type of discourse where
Yes.
it helps to bring about even bigger ideas
Yes.
for
Yes.
ourselves, for others. You know, I implore my audience to really take this on.
Yeah.
Even and I have to say this too, because I have the joy of
Yeah.
teaching traditional and even non-traditional students. And
Yes.
so for the non-traditional student who has been out of college or been out of school 5, 10, 20 years, you know, there are opportunities in STEM that are out there that you can do. You
Yes.
know,
Absolutely.
you could have been in the field, and I'm saying that to others, but also even for myself, especially as you're talking about, you know, graphics and grant writing and such. You know, there is space for everyone to excel far
Yes.
beyond what you think you can or could have done.
Oh,
The
yes.
opportunities are out there. I know at certain campuses, you know, they have certification programs and a lot of associate degrees that are
Yes.
in the medical profession make really, really good money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's just such a wide array now of what you can do. And it does. It's like, man, I wish they would almost teach a class just on what are all the jobs that are out there where you could fit in. Cause I think it's important. And if you know, if we don't know, then we don't know. If it's not being promoted, we have no idea what's out there. And so yeah, I think that is definitely important. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I agree with you. Couple of more questions. Couple
Okay.
of more questions. Um, what does success look like for you, Dr. Patterson, beyond the titles, degrees, or credentials? What does that success look like outside of those?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this question because I tell people that it's funny. A lot of people like to use this word with me, which is humble. Because when I walk in a room, you're not gonna hear me say I'm Dr. Patterson. You're not gonna hear me talk about my degrees. That's just not my thing. I come from a place of humility because I had to work hard to get here, but there are a million people who had to work harder than me so that I can get here. Right. So when I think about education, I'm always humbled. I don't think I'm better than anybody, right? And so I think when I'm thinking about success, it's truly a day by day basis. What did I do today that pushed science further, that got us closer to a cure, that may have changed or impact somebody's life? Even if it's small, did I teach somebody something today? Did I have a successful experiment? I tell people sometimes we think too far along and we don't know how to pat ourselves on the back. And I had to learn myself, I had to teach myself that, absolutely teach myself that, and say, what did I do today that made an impact? So to me, it's not some huge thing where it's I gotta show the world that I cured this thing. No, what did I do today that made some furthered the science, a little bit better? Maybe it was something that I discovered that nobody else did. And I may not be able to publish that for another year or so, but that was something I did today. And I have to pat myself on the back for it. So I definitely think that's what success is. What impact are you making day by day? Are you teaching somebody something? Are you furthering the science along? What is it that you're doing? And that's kind of how I measure my success.
So well said. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That day by day, hour by hour,
Yeah,
giving that gift of self. And I think that there
absolutely.
beyond, because I tell my, I say with my students, I don't walk around with my degrees with me, right? So
Yeah,
people will assume what they want whenever they see me at the grocery store,
yeah,
at any place. But at the same token, though, that humility of making certain that when you are in a room, that you
hmm
make that space and you hold that space,
oh yeah,
um, especially in the realm of what you're doing, making cures so that the future people that succumb to those diseases, they
yeah,
have some type of way to not just, be medicated, but to be cured from it.
absolutely. Yeah,
I
yes,
mean,
that's
how
the goal.
amazing.
That's the goal. That's what I
I
tell
mean,
people. That's the goal. And you got to take that day by day. Sometimes things take 10 years. Science is not an overnight thing, right? It takes us a very long time to do these studies. And it's because you want to be thorough. You want to make sure you're answering something because you're impacting somebody's life. That's the reality. So if you're rushing through it, if you can't prove something 2, 3, or 4 times in a lab, it shouldn't be in somebody's body. I
hmm.
have to remind people of that. We can't rush these processes, right? And so you have to almost measure that success day by day, and say, I did something that pushed this thing further to a cure. Yeah, absolutely. It matters.
Oh man, you matter so much, NiNi.
Oh,
Like this has been such an amazing. I have one more question for you,
okay.
but I mean, just an
Thank
amazing,
you.
amazing opportunity to really just walk with you. Just the tip of the iceberg, essentially. Like, I know
Yeah.
there's so much more that goes with it, but you are truly blessing us today on this podcast, this interview. So, this is definitely a success here today,
Thank
for
you so
real.
much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so one more question.
Yes, ma'am. I'm ready.
All right. What hip hop song or artist best represents your relationship with science right now?
Oh man, that's such a hard question. Because I love so many of them.
I- I'll give you two. I'll give
Oh
you two.
man. It's so funny. And I'm gonna say this because it is so. Can I pick two? Because I
Yeah.
feel like I got an old school and sort of a new school mode area. Okay, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I
Yes,
have
ma'am.
to say it has to be Pac. Got to be Tupac for old school, right? And because of look at the impact that he made on the community, and not just with music. I mean, this guy went political. This guy was amazing, and he was so young when he
Yeah.
made that impact. I mean, I look at him, and that really that impact that he had, and he used his platform for so many reasons, is really where I get my motivation. I'm like, Pac, he did it for me. He said, I'm not only coming at y'all with the music talented, I'm gonna show y'all I'm poetic. I'm serious with politics.
Mhm.
I love Pac for that. So
Yeah.
that has to be one. And then
Okay.
the other one I think for me is I love Young Jeezy. I do. Everybody knows that I love me some Young Jeezy.
Okay.
And the reason why is that I think during his era, he really brought a different, unique sound that
Mhm.
it no matter when you listen to his music, it's just timeless, right? And
Yeah.
that's how I want my science to be. No matter when you might read a paper that I had, it's timeless. That made an impact in somebody's life. I did that thing, and so I think those two people for me. I'm always listening to Pac and Jeezy in the lab. Those are my two favorite people.
Absolutely. Tupac, shout out to the life and love in the state of Tupac
Man,
Shakur. And shout out to Young Jeezy for sure.
yeah,
I
yes,
know, like, right, my song for 2026 was Real As It Gets with Young Jeezy and
ooh,
Jay-Z. Yeah, so I know what you mean when it comes to Jeezy for sure. Oh,
yes, I love it.
oh my goodness. Such
Thank
an
you, thank
amazing interview. This is just part one to a lot of different things. And I definitely have some thoughts of getting together with you to do some things in the community as
you.
well.
Let's
Because
do it. Let's do
you are
it.
such a Wonder Woman. You are such a powerhouse,
Yeah,
NiNi. And I hope that today you felt like that on the Hip Hop Scholar
I
podcast. For
did.
real.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having. This was beautiful. It was amazing. I told so many people about this. I was like, yo, I gotta get this. So there
Yeah,
has been people looking at Melanie, the hip hop scholar. Trust me, they like we gotta check her podcast out. And thank you so much of what you're doing. It really is impactful. I watched some of your shows, and I mean, amazing interviews. And I love the wide array of topics that you have and the individuals that you're bringing on. They all matter. They really do. I love this idea. Thank you, Queen, for doing this. It matters. It matters so much. So thank you for having me. I'm really honored.
absolutely. Absolutely. The work is a labor of love for sure. So
Yes.
this is my
Yes.
laboratory and me trying to resolve my goal for this podcast and for my PhD is to build a literacy curriculum to save
Yes.
literacy altogether based
Yes.
off of hip hop because again, the array of people, the different educators, scientists,
Yes.
lawyers, artists, there's, hip hop and everything and it is again this molecular structure that
Yes.
absolutely can build and support and grow the positivity that we desperately need in today's society. Absolutely
Absolutely.
so.
Yeah,
So,
I agree
yes,
with you.
ma'am.
Yes. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
You're welcome, girl. And so, to end the podcast, thank you so much, Hip Hop Scholar family, with NiNi, the hip hop scientist. You can see the links and you can follow her on her own TikTok and Instagram and see the amazing things and fun things she does with science.
Yes.
I'm Melanie, the Hip Hop Scholar podcast. We are out of here. Peace.